So to talk a little bit about our philosophy, the services and the ethics that we carry. So as Evelyn mentioned, 2019, All Face became a licensed child placing agency in March of 2019. And as that licensed agency, we are required to follow 14 sets of regulations, codes, and statutes, including ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, and ICPC, which is the Interstate Compact on the Placement of Children. And this lends support to the ethical process All Faiths abides by in supporting the adoption triad. So when we do pregnancy counseling, All Faiths really is focused on the best interest of the child while also acknowledging the journey of this child begins with the birth mother. So as part of our philosophy, we ensure the birth mother is the one who is in lead of this whole process. She's leading us in exploring what her options are. And the pregnancy counseling really is to provide her with all options related to her pregnancy and potential for placement or parenting. And All Faith supports her through that process. We always give them the option to continually to decide if they want to parent their child. And if it is feasible, we support them through that as well, providing resources to them as possible, which Evelyn will kind of share next.
So within our adoptions program, we have case management and case management services are offered to the pregnant person. These can include support in finding housing, support in accessing basic needs, and supporting whatever the pregnant person needs to have stability. Stabilization is key so that they can make the best decision possible for them and their baby. Then once a decision is made and a family is identified, the support continues. We also offer doula services. We offer this so that the birthing experience can be as positive as possible for the baby and the mother. Often the women we serve have sexual trauma, addiction, or they have experienced acute amounts of stress due to life hardships. This can increase the amount of pain and anguish experienced in childbirth. Therefore, the doula can provide some relief and support to this experience.
And our modest doula is sitting right next to me. Just saying.
Thank you. We do a pre-adoption home study, which is really extensive, and I'm going to sum it up. All of the families that are considered for placement have gone through the safe home study process. This is an extensive process that entails a complete look into the lives of the family. The home study is designed to assure safety of the placed child. The home study is also a time the family explores who they are and what they want to present as birth families consider where they want their child to be placed. The home study is extensive and it looks into every aspect of the family's life: finances, culture, beliefs, habits, and trauma history. While this can be a daunting process, it's imperative to be sure that the child we are placing goes to a safe and stable home that matches with the values and hopes of the birth families.
Absolutely. And so then we also talk a bit about our matching and our placement. So if we consider adoptions in the past, the mandated secrecy, we know that birth families knew nothing or very little about their children and potentially of the families that they were placed with. And we understand that this created ongoing grief and loss, as well as regret and fear. At All Faiths, we support birth family in changing this pattern by providing them with the opportunity to select and meet potential adoptive families. Studies have shown that birth families experience a reduced sense of grief and loss when they're able to select a family, and more importantly, have an ongoing connection with their child and their child's new parents. All Faiths facilitates this match meeting to ensure a sense of connection, to make sure that it is connected in that the connection has been created to really validate the relationship. And when we have that match meeting, we talk about very important topics that are related to the future of the family. Ideally, when given the opportunity to work with families prior to placement, we attempt to establish a transition plan that leads to a successful placement. And in infant adoption, this transition usually takes place in the hospital after birth, which we got to experience just last week.
Yeah. So after a child is placed in a home, we do some follow-up work. And that's called post-placement services. So once an infant or a child is placed in the home, there are monthly post-placement follow-up appointments. It's a mouthful. And these appointments are designed to make sure the child or children and family are acclimating well, and a way for us to provide support and resources where they are needed.
Yes. And post-placement usually takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending. Now, we have run into situations where children who are placed, older children who are placed outside from an outside state, they do have designated differences in that post-placement period at times. So. All right. So supporting the triad means we have a team of people working together as a safety net for the members involved in this process. So when we talk about that support for birth families, we're talking about grief and loss. And as I mentioned earlier, that open contact, that connection, the open agreement reduces that grief and loss. Now, I say reduce because it doesn't make it go away. That is going to be an ongoing thing. But one of the services that we do provide is to offer grief and loss counseling for birth families indefinitely, because we recognize that adoption grief is different than other types of grief, and it can really impact birth families throughout their lives, depending on a variety of circumstances. You might think about, birthday, the birth of the child. That day might be pretty traumatic. You might consider Mother's Day or Father's Day, or even just special holidays, and how that may impact a birth family when they are going through the process of grief. So as Evelyn mentioned earlier, the resources, support and stabilization pre-birth and post-delivery. We want to make sure that our birth families have that security that they need to move forward. We also have on-call support, which is meant to cover all family needs, as the adoption team is continuously updating each other on what families we're working with and how we are serving those families in our agency. Our on-call support is managed by therapists, and it's available to birth family, it's available to adopted families, and we all want you to know that it's available for referrals as well.
So more about the adopted family. So once a child is placed in the matched home, the post-placement visits begin. We begin to learn about the successes of the family, and we learn about the needs of the family. Since we are an umbrella agency, often we link the family to therapists or in-home services that are already in place at all faiths. Some of our families are in different cities and counties throughout the state, so we research the area and find what's available to the families in their communities. As needs arise, we support the families in accessing these services and can even provide in-home training, such as trauma support training if necessary. We also have a great amount of trainings we link families to digitally.
Absolutely. And as it states on the slide, we do have the Fiesta Project, which is a peer support model for adoptive families who support other adoptive families. And they have an incredible resource of people and information that is amazing for everyone. So when we talk about the adoptee, all faiths will provide therapeutic services for an adoptee who may need additional support in the transition to a new home. We often see some of our younger children who are actually older child placement for therapeutic services to adjust to the transition. And at times, as Evelyn mentioned, a child and the family may need additional resources such as specialized assessments, early intervention services, and other resources. So we try to provide all the supports that a family may need, trying to anticipate what might happen, or just from the experience that we are familiar with. All right. So this is an opportunity for you all to kind of share a little bit about yourselves. We want you to explore how you present yourself or identify based on your culture. In the chat, if you could put in some words that you consider to be your surface culture, that which is visible based on appearance, actions, or behavior. And while you're sharing those thoughts, we're going to fill this canopy a little bit with some of the basics. So give us some thoughts about how you see your own culture, please, if you don't mind. female, Latina,
Elder.
elder. I love
funny.
that. Perfect. Yeah. Hispanic. Good. Bold mother community female herbalist. Cool. That's neat. Christian young millennial. Okay. I love it.
Female, biracial, Gen
Gen
Xer.
Perfect. Family first, faith, family first. Okay. Awesome.
Geriatric millennial. Okay, Amanda. A free spirit nature lover. I know you are.
Awesome.
She, her, indigenous dog mom.
Perfect.
Yes.
I love it. Dog moms are important.
Yes.
Queer woman, Caucasian mother, millennial student, nurse agnostic.
Yeah.
Nice. White female elder, millennial. Awesome. God, I feel old. Gen X female, biracial, children. Awesome. Food.
Any food? All the food?
I'm with you. I'm an all food person too. Female Latina mom. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Red and green chile. Ah. Yes. Excellent.
Swifty.
Awesome. Hispanic, she, her friend, New Mexican.
Sweet.
Yes. Awesome, awesome. So as you can see, we have some of the basics that we might consider, you know, our traditions, the way we dress, the sport activities that we watch or engage in, music that we listen to, the art that we curate or, you know, appreciate. Some of these are just regular things that we may not consider, right? When we are looking at somebody, and we might assume things about the other. So if we think about deep culture, we want you to take in mind to consider that deep culture is really based more on our attitudes, our styles and beliefs. And we acknowledge that deeper aspects of our being lends to our judgments and our actions, right? So the purpose of addressing this is to bring awareness to our own bias and beliefs that impact how we interact with others. So these are areas that we really want to set aside to allow us to support without the internal conflict of our own ideals. Okay. So when we think about that deep culture, we're talking about concepts related to a variety of things, you know, justice, fairness, beauty, modesty, leadership, friendship, our roles, right? Our gender roles, all the classes, how we approach our relationships, marriage, dating, rites of passage. We think about rites of passage, how strong those are in our very ethnic cultures, right? So, you know, the strong Catholics, our Native American populations, approaches to physical space. You know, we know some cultures that have, you can be right in their face and they're okay with that, and others that like even an arm's length might not be enough. How we handle conflict, what work-life balance looks like. You take it.
So we think about communication styles and rules like facial expressions, gestures, body language, tone of voice, eye contact, humor, context, conversational patterns, language, personal space, like she was talking about, handling and displaying emotion. So you can see that all of this gets pretty complicated when we're doing home studies, when we're meeting with birth mothers, when people are trying to figure out what kind of family they want their babies in. And then we keep going deeper. I like this one a lot, like attitudes toward cooperation and versus competition, work. How do you feel about nature? Someone commented on that earlier. Who's a foreigner? War, peace, generational differences, dependence, education, health, well-being, death. How are we in community? Is that important to this family? All kinds of things. So it's a really fascinating way to explore what people or even help people communicate who they are. It's a big process.
Absolutely. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts about this? Or as a professional, do you have any of your own experience that you would like to share with us? When it comes to how you interact based on culture, your own culture versus someone else's.
Did I hear you correctly when you said whether or not an adoption is open or not is based on the birth family?
Correct. At
decision
our
of the choice?
agency, only a birth family can decide to have a closed adoption. We really, when we
so-
are working with our families, the prospective adoptive families, we encourage them and actually just say that they have to be open to either semi-open or open when we are moving forward with a plan for them.
And so once it's legally complete, do they change, or do they have the right to change that, or how do you make sure that that stays?
So once during the finalization process, we actually have a contract that is created that is submitted to the court that has been signed by the birth family and the adoptive family when we are doing semi-open and open. If a birth family has decided to do a confidential, there is nothing that is filed, and that's just entered into the court record. And so it would require some legal changing if that were the case.
And so do you have a lot of families, or does that kind of present a barrier?
We actually, Chelsea, you want to say anything about this? Or should we get contact information and reach back?
Yes, Jamie, can you put your contact information in the chat and we'll follow up with you?
Thanks, Jamie. All right. So we want you to share a bit about how you think a birth mom might be feeling and what her experience would be like. So I'm going to share a different screen with you.
There we go. Shame.
Do you want me to read them to you? Would it be easier?
Oh, that would be awesome. Yes, thank you.
Sure, sure. So we have shame and guilt. Ashley, Allegra, fear of the unknown. Rebecca said overwhelmed and guilt.
I usually know how to type.
That's all the pressure.
Overwhelm and guilt.
Guilt, yep. Next one, Renee said like a failure.
Mm.
Sonia said grief. I think you have that one already, but Anne said sadness. Ashley said pressure to make a decision.
Yes.
Lizzie said conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine said worry. Amy has a longer chat in here. It's kind of a question. I don't know if you want me to read that out loud now or you want to take a
We'll go
question at
back
the
to
end.
that. Yeah.
Okay, it's Amy Finley has that question.
Okay.
And then the next addition for how a mom might be feeling, fears, worries, regret, and doubt. It's from Keely. Fears, worries, regret, and doubt.
Perfect.
Denise said overwhelmed, confusion, and denial.
Yes.
And then Allegra said relief.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you guys are awesome.
Adriana, there's a bunch here. Scared, confused, angry, guilty, relief. Scared, confused, angry, guilt, relief. Depressed and anxious.
Oh, yes. Oops.
Jacqueline said inadequacy.
Yes.
Renee said judged.
Yes, I spelled that wrong. That's okay. Yeah, you guys know what I'm trying to say.
Vanessa said concerned. Jamie said worried about regret of choice.
Mm-hmm.
McKeel, I hope I said that correctly, said relief, conflict, and burdensome.
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn said scared.
Okay.
Tanya said hopeful for child. And Anna said happy for child.
Okay, nice. And we had failure from before. Thank you, Tracy.
Tracy said failure. Yep. That's the end of the list.
Oops, where did you go? Excellent.
And then that question from Amy, just to put that on your radar.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that's everybody.
Perfect, awesome, thank you. Wonderful job, all. I mean, this is amazing. So I don't know if I have any new stuff to share when I go to on my next slide. So let me go back to our PowerPoint real quick. That was an amazing list of words. Perfect. So I imagine a lot of you have already had the experience of seeing the iceberg, right? I mean, I think it's pretty common in many ways. And so when we look at the iceberg, it's much like our cultural tree. It has the visual aspect that others might be able to see while also having a level beneath that is not visible to others. And so in using our trauma-informed lens, we might be able to see certain emotions that a birth mother may be presenting, while also acknowledging there is more that is not visible to us when we are working with birth moms. And these are just as impactful to her experience, if not more so, right? So you guys are going to see a lot of what you've already said when we talk about this. So relief, absolutely. She might feel relieved that there is an option. There might be some ambiguity, right? Questions about the choice and moving forward. Lack of trust. A lot of our birth moms have been traumatized to the point of not being able to understand who they can trust. Disbelief. I remember my second birth mom was shocked that she was pregnant because she didn't think she could get pregnant. So it was just unbelievable to her. Feeling judged, defeated, angry. It can be lots of anger, sense of hopelessness. Some insecurity, you know, if our families, our birth families are struggling financially, what's this additional person coming into the world going to be, and how's that going to impact the security or insecurity that they currently have? I don't remember what that last one was. Sadness, someone talked about sadness, confusion, fear. And so if we look underneath, and these can be changed, right? There can be some that are from the top part of our iceberg that might be down in the bottom, and vice versa. Just depends on the individual, as everything is so different. So feeling misunderstood, as we talked about that judgment, feeling pain, disappointment, worthlessness, feeling rejected. I know a lot of our birth moms have, you know, ultimately just had a recent breakup. Powerless, shame and guilt, absolutely. Unstable, fear about the future. Somebody said that and I was really impressed. Yes. Feeling heartbroken, feeling unfit, feeling hopeless, exhausted. Yeah, that's a lot to process. Isolation. A lot of our birth moms have come to us because they have no other supports and they may feel isolated. Lonely, vulnerable. How is vulnerability with a trauma person? Helpless. And the guilt is, of course, a big thing. Any thoughts about that? I feel like you guys did an excellent job kind of reviewing and sharing what you thought might be, and definitely spot on. You guys did awesome. All right, so language is really important, and especially when we're working with others. And as professionals, we really have to be conscientious about that. So we have to keep in mind that we might be perceived as having a level of power over those we serve. Kind of goes back to that lack of trust. So we really have to build that rapport with our clients, right? So as such, it's essential to acknowledge that our words, whether spoken or written, like in clinical notes, will impact the client in current services as well as long-term services. So we really have to practice setting aside our potential biases and our prejudices. And hopefully this will allow us to see the human before us as a person who has experienced difficulties, as most of us do in our lifetime, right? We all have challenges that we have to deal with. And so we all have our own challenges, and hopefully that gives us the ability to be empathic and to display some compassion. So when working from a trauma-informed approach, it's imperative that we ask where the behaviors are coming from, rather than assuming that the behavior is willful. So when we see these birth moms and they're not sure where they're going with their plan, we have to step back and see the person for who they are, no matter what their actions, what their words are, and practice that sense of compassion with them. What I have here about language, so in our adoption triad, we talk about birth family or first family when we are talking about the family who is pregnant, the adoptive family, and then of course the adoptee. And when we talk about adoption, we don't want to talk about putting up or giving away. We really talk about using the words plan of adoption or making a plan of adoption or placement. And then we also talk about birth moms when they decide they want to parent, rather than saying they're going to keep the baby as if it was an object that could be moved around. We want to be mindful of the words that we use when we are working with birth families as professionals. And also just out of respect for the people who are going through this process. They're already stigmatized. We want to break that pattern, and we really want to support these families. You want to add anything?
I hope you can see how complicated this is, and just like the question that was asked earlier, I think there's never really a clean answer to any of this. It's more about helping the people that we're working with move through their decisions, whatever that may be, because it's not about us. Like, it's about the needs of the family and the needs of the birth mom.
Absolutely. So a general question here, does this shift your perspective or give you a different interpretation of adoption and the experience of birth families? You guys are a quiet group.
Well, I think it gives a great perspective for people who have a choice to make and not, I think sometimes people might be pressured to go the adoption route. And so when you guys have people who you're working with, do you kind of screen them for that, or is there any way to tell, like, if somebody, if an, like let's say somebody who's being trafficked maybe, and they have to give up their kid in order to continue to work, is that something that, I mean, you may not even have experienced that, but like teenagers, people who somebody else is making a decision for their life.
Or an older child?
We could only hear
Oh.
part of what you said.
Oh, I'm sorry. So somebody that like is somebody like a teenager who might be giving up her child or his, and it's based on like the parents' decision and not really their own. Is that something y'all screen for and try to support?
Yes, absolutely. So our youngest birth mom was 13 when she was pregnant and 14 when she delivered. And at the age of 14, she is able to make that decision for herself. Now, when we are doing our pregnancy counseling, we want to make sure we cover all bases, no matter what the age, because that's part of the process. So we ask them, you know, did they consider termination? Did they consider another family member who might want to raise? So the birth mom really has the choices. And like I said in the presentation, oftentimes family members will intervene and try to influence, but we really try to establish that connection with the birth family to make sure, especially birth mom, that this is the decision she wants. Is that helpful? Okay, so we do have some comments. Thank you. It sheds light on different perspectives. Awesome. I like the shift in the phrases you use. Perfect. I appreciate the emphasis on language and being thoughtful about the language and what message can be sent by the words we use. Absolutely. I agree the wording used in regards to those involved in adoptions is much better. Thank you for a wonderful reminder how much our words do matter. So timely. Thank you both for all you do. I appreciate all the services provided for the adoption triad, everyone involved. Absolutely. It's a unit, not just one person. And it looks like Chelsea answered Amy's question. Fantastic. I appreciate having a better understanding on the other side and a more in-depth look on adoptions. Perfect. Thank you all. I appreciate that. So as I mentioned, we have our contact information here on this slide. And if you want us to get that to you, just send us your email. We'll send it to you. Again, we do have that 24-hour on-call phone. That is the top little box there. And that's for birth families, adoptive families, and referrals. We do get a lot of referrals from the hospital post-placement. So, I mean, post-delivery. So we try to manage it as quickly as we can and as continuously as possible.
And it has a question.